Well, good afternoon, everybody. After a very long hiatus, I am Kim Infanti back with Advancement Live, and I am so thrilled. I am going to get right into our broadcast, which is really about a hot topic, and that is engagement scoring. So I have three guests with me today to tell you all about what to expect when it comes to figuring out how do you look at your engagement activities and how do you set a really solid strategy for engagement. So we will get right to this. This is Advancement Live. It is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, and our episodes offer you direct access to some of the best people in our industry. So you can be part of today's live broadcast. You can do that by tweeting with us. The hashtag to use is hashtag Higher Ed Live. And again, it is all about engagement scoring. How do you look at the activities that you're doing at your university and then assign some value to those and really use that to chart your strategy moving forward? All of our episodes are free. They are easy to access in our video archives, and you can find those archives at higheredlive.com, or you can take Higher Ed Live with you and you can subscribe to our podcast. We have heard that our podcast downloads are in the thousands, and we are so grateful to all of you who really take the time to tune in, maybe not live, but maybe as you're walking across campus in a few weeks to tune in to our podcasts that really focus on some awesome topics. So of course, Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, but today's episode would not be possible without our dear friends at iModules. iModules is the sponsor of today's program, and we will meet one of the iModules team members in just a few minutes. But first, Higher Ed Live, of course, produced by M. Stoner. They are a digital-first agency, and they are committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. Of course, we all know that planning and organizing and maintaining content for both our university websites and other sites can be really challenging. There's competing priorities, there's all kinds of resources that you're limited with, and then there's departments that are very much siloed. And so whether you're preparing for a large-scale website redesign, or maybe you're building a capital campaign website, or you're refreshing just a couple pages on your website, we know that you want the right content. And so M. Stoner, tomorrow, their content strategist, Shannon Lanus, is going to lead a content planning and delivery for higher ed websites. It's a free webinar. It is September 26th. It's at noon Eastern time, 9 if you're lucky enough to be on the West Coast. And it is hosted by Gather Content. So she will share all kinds of practical examples, all kinds of techniques you can use, how to avoid all the pitfalls when it comes to content. And that is tomorrow, and we will tweet a link for how to join that webinar in just a little bit. So that's the end of my spiel, and now it is time to get to the good stuff, which is all about our engagement scoring. And I've got three really terrific guests. Two of them are absolute rock stars because they came off their alumni weekend right into sitting down for a Higher Ed Live episode. So first, though, we will meet Mirko Widenhorn, and Mirko is with iModules. He is a strategic consultant and a senior account manager. He is no stranger to Advancement Live, so I'm thrilled to have Mirko with us this afternoon. And we have from Muhlenberg College, first up, Judy Sittler, who is Assistant Director of Donor Relations and Special Projects in Muhlenberg College's Office of Advancement. And then Natalie Hand, who is Assistant Vice President of, and I love this combination, and we'll certainly talk about this in today's episode, Assistant Vice President of Alumni Affairs and Career Services for Muhlenberg College. So those are our three guests. Tremendous hour ahead for you as we really dive into engagement scoring. And Natalie and Judy, I love how things come full circle. So I want to kick off today's episode by asking you, what made you decide to try engagement scoring?
Well, we have been part of a group in the Lehigh Valley of a number of colleges that work together every year. And so alumni engagement scoring is something that we've been talking about for years. And then we, as an executive team here, had the opportunity to participate and watch one of these broadcasts. And it just seemed like the right thing for us to do. I think everybody who does alumni affairs is struggling to answer the question of, are you really engaging people? How many people are you engaging? Are you moving the needle in any significant way? And we couldn't answer that except anecdotally. And that seemed not enough. And then once the college made the decision to bring career services under advancement and join with alumni affairs, the opportunity to really look at engagement and understand what we were doing that was making a difference and putting some numbers to it, I think gave not only the college confidence in what we were doing, but I think it gave the staff confidence. It affirmed what they knew. It helped us prioritize, which I think was a huge piece of it. We were able to always add things to our plate. We had a lot of trouble letting go of anything.
No.
True. And so I think this gave us a chance to really be much more business minded in the sense that we felt that we knew what we did added value, but now we had somebody besides us kind of affirming that. So for us, it was a very easy decision to use iModules and go that route. It just made so much sense. They had answered so many questions that we had as we were trying to think of how we would go about doing it.
Tremendous. I was just tweeting that quote. We knew what we did added value, and now we had something besides us affirming that. Right. And I think that really is what engagement scoring is all about. So I'm going to jump over to you, Mirko, and I think Natalie touched on this, but why is engagement scoring important in your eyes? What's your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think Natalie already covered some of the key areas, but when we first decided to build an engagement scoring offering, probably about 3 years ago is when we started conversations on our end about that. It was because, one, we were hearing a lot of conversation in the field about it and just people asking those same questions that Natalie was. It's how do we know what we're doing is working and is resonating with our population? So I think that was the underlying reason that we decided to create this engagement offering. But I think the background is also that every alumni relations office that I know of is being asked to measure more and more and more, yes. Certainly over the past few years. And it's great that more data is being tracked, but I think the challenge with tracking certain elements of data is that it just becomes one more thing. So if you look at the number of event registrations that you have, if you look at things like return event attendees, if you're looking at email metrics, obviously donation metrics, volunteer counts, whatever it is, that's a list of 15 metrics potentially that you're being asked to track. And then I think the challenge is, okay, what do you do with that? How do you even use that other than showing, oh, we increased our event attendance or our open rate changed by 1% or whatever it is. So where I really see the huge benefit of engagement scoring is it brings all of that data together into really one score for your population. So you can understand who's engaging, how they're engaging, and also to Natalie's point, start to see change and whether what you're doing is helping and which groups are being more responsive and where there's an opportunity to adjust. So I think it makes that whole process of making, I hate to use the term, data-driven decisions a lot easier. And again, there's another part to this whole thing, which is the people part. Right? We do work in alumni relations, and it is all about the personal relationship. And engagement scoring isn't trying to take that away from you, but it's giving you more insight into what's already happening.
Terrific. Awesome. So Judy and Natalie, take us through, and Mirko touched on a few of the things that generically are tracked when it comes to crafting an engagement score. At Muhlenberg College, what activities are you tracking and how did you decide, because we're in the throes of that right now, how did you decide what to track?
We actually started working with our Office of Institutional Research, and we were trying to develop our own alumni engagement score. And this was taking place over the summer last year. And we're collecting data, and then that's when my colleagues saw the podcast and saw this product offered by iModules and realized this was a much better option for us. So we started working with Mirko, and we decided in consulting with him and then also with several people here on our team that we would start tracking email activity, event attendance, giving history, our Muhlenberg Connect site usage, which is our alumni website, also hosted by iModules, and then volunteerism. So just to give a little detail on those, for email activity, it was really easy for us because the email platform we use is iModules. So they were able just to pull that activity and we didn't have to provide anything.
Sorry, by activity, you mean open rates?
Yeah, and Mirko could probably talk to that better, what is actually pulled into it, but I think it's things like email clicks and open rates. And then for event attendance, we're tracking that in our database. It's what it sounds like. And then giving history, that's pretty self-explanatory. And our alumni site usage, that is also something that was easy to work with iModules on because they're hosting our website. And then volunteerism, we decided to go with Career Center volunteers, our leadership volunteers like Board of Trustees, and then alumni volunteers like the Alumni Board.
Awesome. So those folks would then be tagged in your database and iModules is able to pull that in?
So they're in our separate database at Millennium, and we run the reports with those volunteers, and then I provide that information to iModules.
Got it. I think what I love about the tie-in with iMods for your school and for other schools that use iMod's engagement scoring tool is that it's already being tracked by iModules. It's already there. So it's not a matter of, oh, we have to upload this, we have to do that. I mean, there's not a ton of steps that you have to take.
Right.
To me, would you agree with that?
I do agree. And even the files that we did have to run and provide to them outside of iModules, it was really easy to work with them on. The work we had to do was minimal, and they were able to take it and kind of transform the data in a way that we weren't able to here.
Terrific. So Mirko, they track email activity, event attendance, giving history, alumni site usage, and volunteerism. Does that align with other schools that you're working with? Or is there something maybe that Muhlenberg could add, something that you might suggest? What are you seeing?
Sure. So I think those are certainly the key elements that we recommend. So email is a key one, obviously, from our perspective. Event attendance, and this sort of goes with the new case definition for measuring engagement that would fall into the experiential category for case. Giving obviously is included in that as well, as is volunteerism. So those are the four key areas, not only that we identified when we first built our offering, but also that case the Commission on Alumni Engagement has identified as key elements. So I think that ties in really well. Having said that, there are opportunities to add additional data points if a school would be interested in that. And we work with a number of schools. And for us, it was important that our model is flexible so that if the school doesn't have a certain data point, we don't use that. And if there are other data points that are being tracked, then we do apply that. And I would say to anybody who's thinking about starting this, whether that's with us or whether that's with another vendor or you're doing it on your own, I think that's a key element to keep in mind, that what you build has to be flexible, even long-term, because you may develop some new strategies that you didn't think of when you first created your model, that you somehow need to fit into that. So we do have some schools who look at social media data. It's a good thing to look at. There are all kinds of challenges with that data set because it's very difficult to tie it to the individual constituent and make sure that you're giving the correct person credit for the activity. We have other schools that look at benefit usage. So those are things like participating in the insurance program or some other benefits that they offer alumni where they're tracking that at the constituent level. So it really varies. I think for us, a key element though, and this is something that as everybody who's looking at this, is an engagement score should only be based on engagement activities. A lot of times we get the question about, well, should we put wealth screening in here or some other elements like that. And our response is always, well, no, that's an outside measure of something. It's not actual engagement and actions that somebody has taken with the institution. Similarly, counting the number of emails sent is not a measure of engagement. Because you can send 300 emails to somebody, and if they don't open any or click on any, they're not engaging, right? So that's another element. And I think you'd asked Judy the question about email metrics. So some of the things we look at are email opens, the email clicks, the number of opens, and so we look at the open rate, the click rate, the number of opens, and the number of clicks. Okay. And we also look at recency. When was the last action taken? And all of that rolls up into an email score. And we've validated that and looked at that through the statistical model to make sure, but we purposely did not include number of emails sent in that, but instead chose to do the open rate coupled with the number of opens to have that presented. But again, we don't want to count something that is not actual engagement on the part of.
Awesome. So back to Judy and Natalie, and it may be a little bit too soon in your process, but maybe not. Can you give an example of how in any of what you're tracking, email activity, event attendance, giving history, alumni site usage, and volunteerism, you took some data from that and then used it to change a strategy or try something different or stop, better yet, stop doing something that wasn't working? Can you give an example there?
Yeah, so there were actually a lot of takeaways from the data and the report that we got from iModules. So in trying to just hone in on a few things that we could actually use to incorporate in our strategy this year, we decided on a couple, but just to name two, we found that having a valid email address is really it has a significant impact on the level of engagement for our alumni. So we're focusing on acquiring new valid emails for those that we don't have email addresses for. And then a second thing is we noticed in looking at engagement by decade, by class year, was that there are 2 decades in specifically that have much lower engagement than some of the others. So we're creating targeted solicitations and appeals for those decades to see if we can engage them more.
Tremendous. Natalie, anything to add on that piece of it?
No, I think it gave the whole advancement staff an opportunity to be involved as opposed to just alumni affairs or just career services. So we challenged everybody with the task of, we need more emails. We need more valid email addresses. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, can you incorporate that into your strategic plan? And we plan as an entire advancement group. And we went back through our strategic plan and actually added action goals tied to the alumni engagement score for everybody. So for major gift officers, for the Muhlenberg Fund, which is our annual fund, for career services. So everyone has a piece of helping move the needle in certain areas that we focused on. And we decided that it was important to choose a number of things, but not too many things, so that we weren't all going in different directions. We tried to be coordinated and kind of all keep our eye on the same data point to see if we could make a difference as an entire group.
Awesome. Mirko, this may be a better question for you. When you look at the alumni site usage, are you talking about the logging in, like the behind the login, folks who have activated profiles, or are you just talking about visits to the alumni website? And that, I'm not sure who's best to answer that one.
Sure, I can jump in on that one. Okay. So for us, it is logging in, looking at things like the directory. We're also completing forms that aren't event registration or donation forms. So think of an update contact information form. Any type of other activity that is measurable. Unfortunately, site visits to the site are very hard to track, as you probably know. Again, getting to the constituent level, that's not something that we include today, but it is something we're hoping to do in the future as technology continues to improve. So yeah, right now, logins and then those non-commerce form completions, as well as any activity that happens behind login.
Perfect. I like what Judy and Natalie said about adding this to the strategic plan, getting a lot of buy-in from folks by including them and having that in some of their goals for the year. But in terms of, and Mirko, this question is for you, the actual creation of the score, whether it's going with iModules or going with another vendor, and we're dealing with this now to an extent, involving so many cooks in the what are we going to score kitchen, that it becomes a kitchen with lots and lots and lots of utensils, and we really just wanted to focus on like the fork, the knife, and the spoon. So any advice on how do you hone in on the strategy group to determine your engagement score strategy?
Challenges that I saw when I was in higher ed a few years ago, and certainly hear from other schools. I think there are two challenges that often occur when you're trying to think about engagement scoring. One is the one that you alluded to, with just a lot of people trying to give input, and I'll jump back to that in a second. I think the other one is around weighting of activity, in terms of how much should something count. If you're developing your own scoring model, should a donation be 5 times as much as an email open, for example? Right. And I think that's a really difficult conversation to have and to figure out on your own. So for us, we built that into our statistical model so that weighting happens just as part of the modeling process. So a school or a group of people isn't forced to sit together and try to figure out how important. Because when those people leave and another group may come in, and all of that is lost, and you may circle back and restart the entire conversation. So for us, when we created our offering, that was really important to us. The other thing I want to go back to, Kim, to your question, is who should be involved in this process? And I'll pass that to Muhlenberg in a minute too. But from my perspective, you should have a number of cooks in the kitchen in terms of offices who are represented. Because I think, to me, it's all about buy-in longer term. And I think Natalie made a great point of how this is all incorporated into the different team strategic plans. But I would argue that that might have been more difficult to do had a lot of those people not been involved in the decision-making process at the beginning. I think what you don't want to do, or what I wouldn't recommend, is that this is only an alumni relations effort to bring this to campus. Because again, then you don't have that buy-in when we deliver the visualization and scoring. And you have to build that from there. And then you're stuck on explaining how it was created, what went into it, and all of that. And that's still doable. But I think it makes the buy-in process more difficult, and if you have those individuals involved in the beginning. So I would say you want to have somebody from alumni relations there, the annual giving group represented, advancement services, including prospect research, and then marketing communications. To me, those are the 4 key areas that should be represented, because all of them will benefit from it or be involved in it in some way. And then obviously you want to share it with leadership as well. In terms of the number of people from each of those areas, I think that's where you need to look internally to see what makes sense. You don't want a team of 15 people trying to figure out how to build this engagement score, because then it does become way too many people who are involved. So you want to look for some of the key people who have a solid understanding of the various programs and engagement activities. And then what I would do is give people an opportunity for input in terms of the data points that they feel should be measured. So maybe that is something you open up to a larger team, but your core group might be 5 or 6 people who meet about this and then make decisions on it. So you're getting broad input, but then that core team is the one who's deciding a data point makes sense to include, or this one makes sense to include. One more thing to add before I jump to Muhlenberg for a second, but from our perspective, that's where we get involved as well. So our measurement and data analyst and myself will get on calls with schools to help them figure out what should count and maybe what doesn't make sense to count. Because a lot of times we can bring that outside perspective. And it's funny, if somebody comes from the outside and says, this is what should be done, people listen more at times than if it's the people saying that internally. I don't know what it is. I think it's how our minds work. And I'm not saying we're not experts, but we're also experts on campus who are probably saying the same thing. It's consumed a little. But let me stop there. But again, I think the team from Muhlenberg might have some comments as well on who they involved in the process to get that buy-in.
I think that one thing our Vice President of Advancement did was assign it to a senior person of her staff. And so it was understood from the beginning that final decisions were going to be made by, in this case, Kim Anderson and Judy. So we all had opportunity for input, but we also didn't have to sit through 1,000 meetings. We could kind of meet with them separately. They did a great job of coming around, kind of explaining the big picture, and not giving people the opportunity to give input, but not giving up ownership of it. And that was also comforting to feel that there was someone who really was looking at this from a lot of different vantage points and would make the best decision for us on a macro basis. And I think Judy and Kim were very open. They're willing to listen. There have been some things that we've added since we started, and they've been good at suggesting, well, maybe in the future, or maybe we could look at it this way, or maybe a piece of what you're suggesting. They've been very collaborative, but there's been no question that they're taking responsibility for making sure this gets done, and that they are experts in this, along with Mirko. So I think they've done a terrific job with that. I don't know if Judy has anything she wants to add.
No, I agree. I mean, that was primarily the process. Kim Anderson really did a lot of research and consulted with other schools. And so I think we kind of did the legwork in meeting with Mirko and just having recommendations, and then involve those key groups that Mirko named, annual giving, alumni affairs, our advancement services, communications, and had their input, and were able to kind of hone down on the best areas to focus on right now.
Terrific. I just want to remind folks who are watching, and we have lots of people watching, if you have anything to add to the conversation or questions for Mirko or Judy or Natalie, I keep looking away because I'm looking at the Higher Ed Live hashtag, and right now it's packed with tweets from me. So I would love to see some questions, some comments from those folks who are watching, just in terms of, these are our experts, the folks who have been through it, developing it, and of course, Mirko guiding strategy. So if you have anything to jump in with, please do, using the hashtag Higher Ed Live. Judy and Natalie, to go off script for just a minute, when you are determining who's engaged, has that come from iModules, that they've given you a number where anybody above this is engaged, or that's something that you at Muhlenberg determined for your specific alumni audience?
Well, we decided in talking with iModules what alumni base to look at. So okay. We've pretty much decided to go with all of our alumni of record, living alumni, obviously, and then give that information to iModules, and they provide us with the score for each one.
Terrific. We actually got a question as you were answering. We got a question on Twitter. I love it. So this comes from, let me pull it up real quickly, a question from Ronald. He wonders, and you answered it, I believe, as I got distracted, does every alumnus and alumna have a score? And you said you decided to look at everybody. So then yes.
Right.
They do have a score. And then what is the range? Is there and I know this is a large debate as to whether you put a top, peak score, or do you just let it be, always growing? Do you have a range?
We do. And yeah, go ahead.
I can jump in on this a little bit. And then Judy, you can add. But so the way we've built our model is a couple of things based on the questions that have come in. So it's on a 0 to 100 point scale. Again, it's a statistical model, so the weighting is inherent in that, and we group the scores by type of activity. So there is an email score, a donation score, an event score, so you can actually see how somebody is engaging. And when all of those are added together, we rescale it up to from 0 to 100, just to try to make it easier for people to understand. So you're not looking at a 14.2 compared to a 14.56 and trying to figure out, does that matter? So I think that's the first point. The second point is around, I think you'd asked how you identify your engaged alumni, Kim. And we also group individuals into engagement levels. And again, that's part of what comes out of the model. But so we identify your highly engaged alumni, which is usually 2 to 3% of your population. Your moderately engaged alumni, which again, depending on the institution, might be up to 20% of the population. And then your individuals who have low engagement, and then those who have no engagement. No engagement means they've done nothing. There's no measurable activity over the scoring period, which we usually look at 3 years of data. Low engagement would be individuals who open emails, they may have attended one event, they may have made a donation, but that's pretty much it. And then your moderate and highly engaged are really those individuals who are doing more of a number of the things that you're measuring. And then that allows you to think about segmentation to those groups a little bit differently. That's also where prospect research becomes interested, because if you have highly engaged alumni, those might be names you give to prospect research to compare with their wealth screening score or their lifetime giving to see, okay, are they actively supporting the institution? You now have a new data point about them that tells you that they're engaging quite heavily compared to your average constituent. And the way our scoring works is everything is built on the average for a school's constituency. So it's very targeted to that institution. I know that was a lot to throw at you. That's data related. So hopefully that made sense to everybody, but hopefully it gives you an idea as well of how our scoring works.
It did. No, that absolutely makes sense. You know, because there is a lot of debate about it, and what makes sense for one school just might not make sense for another. And I think that's what we have to remember. So thank you, Ronald, for that question. And if there's anything else, just the hashtag #HigherEdLive, and we'll certainly be sure to ask it. So Judy and Natalie, as you've really, you know, worked to hone your score and worked with the iMods team, what are some of the, and we've touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the challenges that you've had? I mean, do you think like, oh, gee, we should really be tracking all of our Facebook commenters, or, you know, if we've got our social media ambassadors, they should really be scored as well? Or any challenges that you've run into in the time that you've been trying this engagement scoring?
Yeah, okay, so Kim, I think one of the challenges is that schools are competitive, right? And so when we rolled this out to our volunteers, to our groups, to help them understand and to be part of kind of the solution, it was kind of like, well, where's our score compared to other people's? And so I think that is taking a bit for them to understand that this is for us, this is what we find important. This is not to look at another school, it's to look at ourselves. And to understand that this number is just a number. There's nothing really attached to it other than it's a baseline for us to begin. So I think that's one thing. And then I think the other thing is that we have so little data in some areas, right, like engagement, that the excitement around getting this data can be that you get lost in the data. So you want to look at it this way, and they have so many fabulous tools that you can get lost in just looking at it and spend a lot of time thinking about how you can slice and dice it. So for us, the big challenge was to explain to our alumni groups that this is a tool that we're going to use, that our number is a good number because it's our number and it's what we found important to kind of track. And then internally, this is where it came back to our strategic plan, so that we didn't have everybody going off on kind of their own path, saying, well, I'm going to focus on the class of 1981, economics majors because in Ohio, because I think I can do that. We tried to get people to really work together and kind of address some of the bigger issues. I don't think we've felt like we've missed something. Social media is a big piece, but we know that's also hard to get your arms around.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. This is a question. First, I'll start with Judy and Natalie, and then Mirko, get your thoughts as well. I think I know what the answer will be, but I'm still going to ask it. Is it best to focus on those most engaged alumni and get them really, really engaged? Is it best to focus on the moderately engaged ones and find other opportunities? Or do you go to the folks who are just like, yeah, Muhlenberg, no thanks, and really work to try and get them engaged so that, you know, you can say, well, 50% of our alumni population is engaged as opposed to 25%. What's your thought on that?
So I think this is a place where we look to Mirko for his expertise.
Yeah.
Because I think we all had different ideas about this. I think one thing is by having those most engaged, the happy thing was that we actually knew those people. So that was confirmation that it's like, okay, we actually are professional enough to know who our top alumni are in the sense of being involved with the college. And so we've talked about ways to just affirm that with them. Not so much move them, but just say we know how committed you are to the school, and we know who you are. I think Mirko had suggested to us that looking at the moderately engaged and low engaged might get us the best return. That moving people from 0 to something might not be the best place to start our efforts. That said, we are trying to increase the number of valid emails that we have. And so that could be anybody. And it'll be interesting to see if we're able to do that, perhaps without even any extra effort. We are moving some of those people who are not engaged at all to some level.
Right. They can't be engaged if they can't open an email from you, right? And we
Exactly.
see that all the time too.
Yeah.
Goes to AOL.com email addresses that haven't existed for 15 years.
Exactly.
No offense to AOL.com. My mother has one still, but those times are transitioning. Mirko, your thoughts on that? And do you focus on the low-hanging fruit, the most engaged, get them more engaged, or do you really look to those folks who just not had many touch points at all?
Sure. So I wish there was an easy answer to this.
I know.
But I think it all depends on the institution and what the goals are for that school. But let me walk you through a couple of thoughts. As it relates to no engagement, that's going to be your toughest group to do anything with. So I wouldn't generally recommend spending a lot of time there, other than to Muhlenberg's point, to Natalie's point, maybe looking for better email addresses. Because just as a side note, what we see is that individuals who are not engaging via email, the rest of their engagement with the institution is also significantly lower. So obviously we have email as part of the score, but we took that out of it for this analysis. So if you can get an email address and get them email engaged, they're more likely to be engaged in other areas.
Right.
But so I think that's a group to look at for email address acquisition. And then I think you break down the individuals with no engagement a little bit more. So your recent graduates who are not engaging, that might be a core group to focus on, because we know through research that if you can engage individuals early on, they're more likely to stay engaged later in life with you. But there's another subset of those individuals who have had no measurable engagement for 3 years that maybe you don't focus energies on. And in fact, I would argue that you even consider removing some of them from some of your communications or your print communications, for example. Mm-hmm. And again, that's up to each school to talk about. But if there's a group, and I'm throwing out random class years, let's say from 80 to 83, who have no engagement over the 3-year period that we measured, maybe you decide that that's not going to be a focus. Not that you're giving up on them completely. Maybe they get one less issue of the magazine, and you use those resources for doing more for some of the individuals with low or moderate engagement to try to increase their engagement, because you know there's already a relationship there. Those are difficult conversations to have. We all know the impact of alumni participation rate on everything in terms of rankings and all of that, and the focus on that. But those are the types of conversations that we have with schools around where to focus on other resources. So now that I've said all that, let me get back to your actual question, which was, who do you focus on? So, I mean, the easy answer is focusing on those who are highly engaged. That's a clear group. But then I think Natalie and Judy alluded to this already as well. So looking more closely at those moderate engagement, and even those with low engagement, and identifying subgroups of that. So if you are in the planning phase for your next capital campaign. Maybe you focus on low and moderately engaged individuals who are in the target demographic of where you need to identify new major donors or potential major donors.
Right.
And maybe you look at that group and you try to increase their engagement. So when you get to the public phase or potentially even the silent phase, you might have a closer relationship with some of those individuals and they're more likely to take a meeting. Maybe you focus on your recent alumni who are already engaging and ask them to be ambassadors for the rest of their classmates to increase overall class year engagement. So there are any number of ways that you can use this type of data to identify groups to focus on. But I think Natalie and Judy hit a key point. It has to fit in with what your overall strategies are and what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's what you use to vet which groups you identify to spend more time with.
Perfect. Judy and Natalie, I don't know if you've dived into it much yet, and maybe, Mirko, you can jump in here too, but have you started to see, if an alum is a Career Center volunteer, he or she is more likely to have made a gift? Have you started to draw some parallels between this engagement activity and another engagement activity, or is it kind of too soon in your scoring journey to have done that kind of analysis?
I think it's too soon.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think what it's giving us is some strategy.
Awesome.
So to look at people who are career volunteers or just volunteers in general and thinking about what is our ask strategy to them that may be different than just to the general public. And so I think it's going to, as we move through the year, I think it's going to have a lot of impact on our communication, on how we're communicating, how often we're communicating. To Mirko's point, looking at the different ways that we're communicating and trying to be more strategic in that sense. I think it lets us do some more individualized communication than we've been able to in the past. In other words, saying, we know that you love the school because you give your time, and we know that you care that the school continues to thrive. That also translates into an importance in terms of alumni giving back to the college financially. And I think we've had some trouble doing that. We've had we have really great volunteers who often are saying, well, I'm giving up my time instead of my contributions. And this is a way for us to really also use peers to say that. In other words, a peer to say, as a volunteer, I do give my time, but I also know the value of giving a gift. And I want to encourage all of you who, like me, are volunteering for the Career Center to make a gift to the annual fund. So I think we're early in this journey, but there's no question that it's just giving us so much to work with beyond our intuition.
Which is so huge. And I think alumni have come to expect, in the age of Amazon, we saw you like this, you might also be interested in this, or, tweets you might like, or we know you're a Career Center mentor. We thought you might be interested, talking to them in a personalized way, as opposed to just throwing things out there and hoping that maybe someone will grab onto it. And that's what makes me so excited about engagement scoring and all the other segmentation that we're trying. That's what alumni are looking for. And now's the time, yesterday was the time to really start with this more strategic communication strategy. So I totally agree with you there. Well, as we look to wrap up, because it's almost 1:45, I want to make sure that, Mirko, as we look at, we've heard such good strategy, such good thoughts and advice from Muhlenberg today. With the other clients that you're working with, as you talk through engagement scoring, what are the trends that you're seeing across the board when it comes to this topic that, as I started at the beginning of this episode, it is such a hot topic now. CASE has a terrific white paper out about it. We found really helpful in starting the conversation about our engagement score. So what are you seeing trends-wise?
Sure, absolutely. What we've actually done is we've looked at results from a number of schools that we work with and started to combine some of those data sets to identify overarching trends. we're still working on that. But some of the things we have noticed are that alumni in the 60s are generally one of the more engaged groups. And that does tie back to valid email addresses. If you have valid email addresses, they're actually often engaged in a lot of cases. And part of that is because they're more likely to give to the institution. Part of that is because of reunion programming. But they are also much more likely to read your email communications. So that might be a group that you begin to personalize email to even more, or you know that they're reading what you're sending them if you have email addresses. That's the group that you try to get more email addresses. So that's one general finding. And another one is all around recent alumni. So generally speaking, the graduates of the 2010 decade and actually of the last 10 years are the most engaged as a cohort. But what we started to do is we broke that into smaller groups and we looked at it actually by class year. And it's really interesting. I think a lot of us look at that recent alumni group as one cohort of 10 years of graduates. What we see in engagement scoring, at least so far, is that the first 3 or 4 years, those groups have higher engagement, with the highest engagement being the first year after graduation. And then their engagement trails off. And then at 10 years out, it's pretty much on par with the other groups. Some of that may be because recent alumni programs are relatively new, but I would argue some of it is also because a lot of us think of that as one group of individuals. So graduates of the last decade, they get the same communications, they get the same programming, regardless of where they are in that 10-year time frame. And if you take a step back and think about the actual individuals, somebody who graduated last year is going to be in a very different place than somebody who graduated 9 years ago. So does it make sense to treat that as one group of recent alumni, or are there actually 3 groups within that potentially? Those who are out the first 3 years, that second mid-tier recent alumni group, they may have finished grad school, they already have an established network, etc. And then maybe towards the end of that 10-year period, there's another group that may be looking to change careers. So that's one of those interesting data points that we want to dive into a little bit more. So I hate to say challenge the concept of recent alumni because that's not what it is, but really refine what we do or what schools do with that recent alumni population. And then I think the last one to talk about a little bit is just looking at engagement by school or college, or if it's a smaller institution, by major, because there are differences there as well based on how they affiliate. And you might find that one school or college has much more engaged graduates, which speaks to some of the programming that might already be offered by that school or college, but it also provides you an opportunity to have conversations with the deans or leadership of those colleges to get them on board to do more. And again, now you have data that helps you present the situation across campus. And it may also lead to people beginning to share more data with you that they've been holding on to in shadow databases, which we all obviously hate, but it might be something like this that convinces them that, oh, you know what, I do want that data to be in the advancement system because it'll make my graduates look better.
Right, really important point. And we have another question from Twitter, from Ronald on Twitter. And this one is for Muhlenberg. And it's a great question. And it's, as you look at the alumni who have high scores on your scale, are you looking at those alumni to be door openers for folks who might be medium or low level scorers, especially if you're able to tell that one of your high scorers is in the same class as one of your low scorers or might know each other from the same workplace? Are you looking at them from the peer-to-peer outreach as opposed to institution to constituent?
Absolutely. I think that is one of the things that this information has given us is it's not only given us the information, it's given our volunteers information, because they're, as I think, uncertain why some of their peers aren't involved or giving back as we are. And again, this is giving them data that isn't just our best guess, but one of the things we're going to do as we look at some of these that aren't involved, we're going to do some surveys to ask them those questions and then share that with their peers to help us perhaps think about communications messages or events and programs that would absolutely address their peer group.
Tremendous. That is, I think that's exactly what Ronald was looking for. And so it makes so much sense. And it's, again, just a way that we're able to use, it's no longer anecdotal, it's data-based decision-making. And that is just so crucial as we move forward.
Kim, I think one piece that Mirko talked about is with young alumni, we have, as many people do, a young alumni council. And so we were able to present this to them to think about the decade that they're trying to reach as perhaps 3 separate or 2 separate groups. And so the Young Alumni Council is, you know, kind of struggling with that themselves and deciding maybe we can't all address the same 10 years of people. Maybe we need to divide ourselves and get a little more focused in who we're reaching out to as a committee. So that's been immediately helpful to them to consider.
Terrific. Thank you all so much. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. Anything, some final parting words on engagement scoring? I feel like we should check in a year from now and just see where you are and see how things have changed and really just look at how crucial this has been to charting your strategy at Muhlenberg. Any last words, Mirko or Judy or Natalie?
So I would say do it, because I think it has really empowered our staff to feel good about themselves as professionals, which instead of perhaps other people in the community perceiving us as just people who throw parties or give stuff away, it's no, we're actually doing what we're doing for a purpose. We can see that what we're doing is moving people along. And I think that that's empowering to the staff. And it's also puts us on a level playing field, I think, with other people in advancement, because we've got something now that we can use to set some goals and then prove that we've met goals beyond just have we gotten more people to come to something than we did last year, which I'm not sure is ever the best goal to be setting, but was kind of the only number a lot of times that we could use.
Right. My boss always likes to say we move from being party planners to hosting programs with purpose. And you really just said it there, that we do have a purpose, and it is not to decorate offices when people arrive on campus or to host tailgates. There's certainly times and places for tailgate parties, but you know, programs with purpose. And that's exactly what engagement scoring looks at, how those programs then serve a purpose and seek to engage more alumni. So I love that.
I would just add, if you're thinking about doing this, it's a great tool, and start collecting as much data as you can. That's one thing we've found is we're collecting more data as we go, and so the earlier you start, the better.
Terrific. Mirko, final parting words? You're here to help, right?
I was going to say, I don't think I can top what the two from Muhlenberg just shared, so I'll just leave it with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to Judy and Natalie. We all know what it's like after an alumni weekend and how purely exhausted you must be, and trying to, you know, tie up loose ends and all of that, and breathe a little after your alumni weekend. So thank you so much for being on our episode today. And thanks also, Mirko, just such great guidance and advice and strategy for folks who are thinking about this, whether it is, you know, an iModules vendor that they choose to go with iModules or choose to go at it alone or whatever it might be. It's just tremendous to have your expertise on this topic, and obviously so important to so many of us as we look at alumni engagement 5.0 or 6.0 or whatever you want to call it. You know, we're not the party planners that we used to be. So thank you, all of you, so much. Thank you to iModules, our program sponsor, of course, to M. Stoner, who makes all of these episodes possible. And if you missed anything, this will be available up on the higheredlive.com website. And of course, you can download it as a podcast as well. It's been great to be back with all of you. It's been great to chat with all of you today, Mirko, Judy, and Natalie. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Thanks, Kim.